Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for coming out. Seminars have a bit of a different feel these days as we're all doing it from the comforts or discomforts of our home. We're living in challenging times, and there's a lot of adjustment needed to keep our nonprofits going. As Global Philanthropic President Guy Malabone says, money drives mission, and we're having to find new ways to keep doing the old things that we know work to generate that money for our mission, for our work. My name is John Brandt, and I, along with Chris Steeves and Lynn Boardman, will be hosting today. This afternoon's webinar is part of AFP's Ottawa's 2020 Professional Development Series, co-hosted by Global Philanthropic. I'll say a bit about them in a bit, and also Harvey McKinnon and Associates, who are represented today by Lynn Boardman. Lynn, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, I just wanted to pop on and say hello from Harvey McKinnon Associates. Can you guys hear me okay? That's all good? Okay. We are a fundraising consultancy that works with charities across Canada on things like direct mail and digital appeals, legacies, and monthly giving. We've been sponsoring this education series for a little while, but I'm more thrilled than ever that we can lend a hand to make this happen. Really appreciative of AFP Ottawa for putting this on, because not to become too, Vancouver West Coast flaky on you, but I really don't know if there's ever been a time that we have needed to help each other out more, right? And support each other more and learn from each other very, very rapidly. So thank you very much for giving us this opportunity, and thanks for letting me be an interloper from here in Vancouver. I'm going to mostly mute myself because the people who are sharing my workspace are not as quiet as the people who usually share my workspace. And I am looking forward to many of Chris's and everybody's tips and tricks for fundraising from home. So thank you for having me.
Great, welcome, Lynn. We'll take the West Coasters as well, certainly. I'll say a little bit about Global Philanthropic. We're a national consulting firm with over 20 consultants across Canada, from Moncton and Halifax areas to out to Victoria and Vancouver Island. And we'll partner with you on capital campaigns, annual fund development, strategic direction, marketing, communications, whatever your needs are. All of us are practitioners and have worked in the field for years. I've worked in the nonprofit sector the last 25 years in organizations ranging. My first one was a small independent school in northern Saskatchewan, and I've worked in some larger humanitarian organizations as well. Saskatchewan, Winnipeg, Pennsylvania, and now Ontario. And I joined Global 3 years ago. I'm currently working with a women's shelter, a theological school, and a tech organization, among some others. And based in Toronto, so I'm not in Ottawa with you, but I do get out to Ottawa on a fairly regular basis and have done some work out there as well. So once travel starts, I'm happy to take the train down, or porter if necessary, to come visit. But we are finding more and more ways to do things online as well, so happy to do it that way. I think Chris will probably mention Virtually Global, but it's something we've launched as well, which is our way of trying to do some online consulting. And for the month of April, we're offering free consulting as well through Virtually Global, and I'll mention that at the end. But our main presenter this afternoon is Chris Steeves. He comes to us from Halifax, and he's been working with Global for the last couple of years. And prior to that, 12 years of fundraising and development experience. He understands the new challenges facing the charitable sector, passionate about forward-thinking teams, embracing new forms of relationship using data-driven insights and technology. And that's something I've learned from him in the last year as well, just how data can help fundraising effectively. He was the Director of Advancement for the Halifax Grammar School and at Dalhousie University in the Annual Giving and Major Gift departments. And most recently, he was for 5 years the Vice President of Development for Fundmetric, a firm focused on turning one-time donors into lifetime supporters using artificial intelligence and fundraising automation. So if you have any AI questions along the way, he's certainly the man to talk to as well. He's an active member with AFP Nova Scotia and was past president there. He also was the recipient of the 2015 Outstanding Professional Fundraising. Well done. So I'm really enjoying working with Chris, particularly around analytics and how to use data to understand fundraising. But Chris is going to talk today about fundraising from home, and I think the presentation is about a half hour, and then after that we're open to conversation. And I'd like to emphasize we'd like this to be a conversation. So if you've got questions, throw them in the chat, but also we can start to talk together as well after the presentation. So you can unmute yourself at that point, and you can also let us see who you are through video at that point as well. We won't judge you for what's on your backgrounds. Thanks, Chris.
Well, thank you, John, and thank you, Lynn, and thank you to AFP Ottawa. It is a real pleasure to join this big group today. When this first happened, when we all started to go, work from home, I reached out to my local AFP chapter, and I reached out and I said, look, given the nature of the work I was doing, working for the technology company, I was doing a ton of selling using video. And again, it's a little different. I mean, I was more on, the sales development side, but very similar principles. And so I'd spent 5 years, learning and sometimes failing and sometimes succeeding in using video to develop relationships, to engage, to work. And so I reached out to my AFP chapter because I thought, wow, there's going to be some significant learning curves that some, not everybody, but some are going to experience with this new reality. And so for me, this is a way of giving back. You've got some really tremendous fundraising experience, not only here in the membership, but also between John, Lynn, and myself. And so we certainly do want to open it up and have more of a kind of an open session once I'm finished my initial talk here. So again, we'll just kick it off. But basically, we're going to work through a couple of these items as you see here. I won't go through them in detail, but the first thing, working from home. There's some new realities here with working from home that we need to kind of think about. And so I'm, as I set up my screen here, there we go. So one of the big things around succeeding about working from home or working kind of not in your traditional office is really about trying your best to establish or reestablish a routine and schedule. I know that's really tough. We've got kids at home, we've got pets, we've got family. But one of the best ways to do this is to really try to create that routine, create that schedule for yourself. We are creatures of habit. This is kind of a very troubling or uncertain time. So it's very, very easy to be distracted. And again, I found the same thing as I began to work from home or work on the road. And really, a routine is going to help us really fend off some of those distractions. So I guess the first bit of advice I say is really attempt to try to create a routine. And again, the routine might be different. I have a lot of people that work early in the morning, they take a good chunk of the day off, and then they're back, working, in the evening time, which is totally fine. Just, create that routine and make sure you stick with it. Working from home, sounds great, working in your pajamas, but it's a really slippery slope. So again, routine is an important thing. Make sure that you're still going through all those routines that you normally would while you're, if you were to be heading into the office, but now you're heading into your home office, if you will. And again, that's kind of that kind of leads into your workspace. The best we can, let's try to create, if you have an office, obviously you're all set up, but if you don't have a dedicated office, or now you're sharing office space with a partner that's also home, or, a spouse or a roommate, really try to create a unique workspace for yourself that has barriers to the rest of the home. And the reason I say this is that, what you don't want to do is kind of be walking through your home and feel like there's work everywhere, feel like, everywhere you are, there's work. It's better if you have a really dedicated space where that's where you keep your office, that's where you keep work, especially that we're all in isolation. Our homes have become a lot more, we've become a lot more close, a lot closer, I suppose, in our homes. So really try to make sure that you kind of create that workspace. I mean, home life is going to be difficult to balance, absolutely, but really create and set those boundaries and those barriers. So try to block off time for yourself to do that. Make sure, the other side though, is make sure that you plan breaks, for example. I found when I was working from home, there was none of the kind of the smaller interruptions, more, you know, social interruptions that you would have working in an office space, those are all gone. And so what I found was I could sit for hours. I mean, in one way it's good, but it's also not good for my body, you know, to sit for hours and just pound out the work and not realize, oh my goodness, I hadn't got up for 4 hours. I haven't gotten up in whatever. So make sure you set those boundaries, set those reminders. Drink water. Now, this is actually a wine glass, but I've been drinking water out of it, so we'll say that. But make sure you take those breaks, you schedule yourself, make sure you get up and do those sorts of kind of regular, just mental and body health kind of things that you need to think about. We do want to make sure that, again, the physical boundaries are important when working from home. And I've heard some ways of people that do this is kind of, they have certain non-technology rooms in the home. So maybe there's a certain rooms, or it's the kitchen or whatever, where it's like, look, no cell phones, no laptops, no work, no news. And we need those kind of technology-free zones to try to help us, manage with all of the information that we're getting today, all of the news, all of, you know, everything's being delivered to us digitally. And so we do need to make sure that we, you know, from the mental health and from the body kind of body point of view, that we create those spaces. I mean, take charge. I'll touch on this a little bit down the road, but this is kind of a strange time, and as we know, and what we're seeing is that, you know, we need like, it's going to be a lot more difficult to do direct supervision and direct managing and more of that day-to-day kind of thing. So we really need to, you know, if we're in a leadership position, we really need to make sure that we take charge, you know, with our work and with what we're trying to approach. And if you're you know, being managed, now's the time that we need to look at how do we help kind of empower our staff to be able to do more. We're seeing a lot of people even change the way that boards are kind of making decisions. We're seeing, you know, we can't just have a monthly board meeting and, you know, well, we'll talk about it next May. Things are moving way too quickly for that to happen. So we're seeing a lot of delegation, a lot of smaller committees that are being empowered to do things. And I think we're going to see the same thing happen kind of with our day-to-day work as well. Isolation blues. I mean, I'm sure you've heard lots of it. It's more just, we just got to make sure that you check in with yourself, try to do things that are going to help you, not only help with your work, but just help with your mental, you know, your mental space. I always like to try to challenge myself to learn something new. And in this case, I think we're all being thrust into learning new technologies. So, I mean, one of the tips that I'm seeing here is kind of like, if you're not familiar with maybe the new video technology that you're using, or if this is kind of new grounds for you, you know, set it up, you know, set up a free account, go make calls to your family or friends or loved ones and test out, get familiar with this technology, get familiar with the buttons and how all the extra features are going to work. Now's the time to do this, because it's very safe to say we may be in this position for a long time, but also even when isolation kind of in the state of emergencies are lifted, I think we're still going to see a lot of, well, let's just say hesitation to meet, especially out of the gate. So I think it's really safe to say we need to be prepared to use these types of tools and technologies, to have major gift and sponsorship meetings, to have committee and volunteer and even board meetings using the new technology. So really take the time to kind of learn it the best you can. And then my last item, set goals. I mean, I think that's pretty basic, but I think what we're seeing is, we were just talking about this with AFP, a group here locally. You know, we have these beautiful, you know, critical paths and plans that we've been, you know, working and using for years. And it's safe to say a lot of those are just simply need to either change, need to be adjusted. And so it's really about how do we set those goals to the new reality of what we're going to accomplish today, and oftentimes break that into a much smaller group. So again, maybe we're doing like a 2-week plan and then revisiting and executing that sort of thing. But also, again, make sure you set goals for yourself as well. It's really easy for these days to just kind of like, I don't know about you, but the days are just kind of flying by here in one way. And so we got to make sure that we set those goals and all those basic principles about, you know, what we would do in the office, we need to bring home. Now, video meetings. I'm sure some of you may not have even heard of Zoom before this all happened. I'm sure we're all fairly familiar with Zoom today, but there are some things that we need to be prepared for. And what I mean is that, again, I do believe that this what's happening with us today is going to have an impact on how we engage and build relationships in the future, good and bad. And we need to really be familiar with, you know, we need to be prepared that we're going to be doing potentially some pretty significant meetings using this type of technology. So here are some basic tips, and then we'll go into advanced tips in a moment. Basic tips, lighting. Now, this is actually not my ideal meeting space to do meetings. I have another place in the home that has a very clear black background, which I'll talk about in a moment, but my partner is using it today, so I'm in the office today, so this is not my ideal setting, but things to think about. Lighting. You want lighting, if at all possible, to be coming from behind the camera, illuminating your face. Faces are still important. First impressions are still going to be important and very important. You know, all the same principles are still there. So we want people to see your face. If you're lit from behind, all you have is shadows on your face. It's very dark. So again, just things to think about. If you're heading into a major meeting, test out your lighting. Figure out where the right place is for the lamp to get the best lighting on your face. Clothing. Again, you just want to think about clothing with a lot of patterns typically doesn't show up really well on camera. So we just need to think about this. So I like to kind of try to wear really solid patterns when I'm doing video chats or am I doing presentations, because it's a little easier for the camera to pick you up. Camera positioning. Well, this is something I learned when I started doing my video calls, and I was having these video calls with clients, and I would spend most of my time like this. And I would be talking down and I would be taking notes and I'd be engaging this way. And it wasn't until I went back and, you know, was looking at my game tapes, if you will, that I went, well, that is not really the right way to be engaging with people. And so you want to think about camera position and eye contact. If at all possible, you want to be talking directly to the camera. Eye contact is still important, and you want to make sure that it's positioned so it's not, you know, camera's not looking up your nose, or it's not positioned from your side and you're over here doing another computer. And again, for obviously small one-on-one meetings or just quick chats with your team, you know, not as important, but I think we need to at least start building those best practices for professionals that we're seeing in other sectors as well. So take a minute. I mean, if you're on YouTube or you follow any YouTube subscribers, take a look at how they're set up, and it's quite amazing what they do with regards to trying to engage people using video. Posture and smiling. Now, I started my fundraising career at Dalhousie University, and I actually started as a student in the Phonathon program. And we were taught, of course, and you know, we were trained that posture when making telephone calls, smiling, all things that come through the telephone. Well, the exact same thing is going to apply here, which means you want to make sure, in my case, I'm trying to do my best power posing here for you to make sure I'm straight up and I'm directly at the camera. And of course, smiling is something that's important. That comes through. It's an infectious, and it will impact your donors, your committee, your volunteers, whoever it is that you are engaging with. Now, maybe you've got the basics figured out. We know what we're doing. I can use video. I'm using it for a long time. It's great. Well, kind of, you know, the next level here are extra things to think about. Security. So I'll give you an example. If you haven't heard of this yet or read it yet, I was hosting a chat. We had about 70 people online, and there were a few people that were having problems connecting. Well, someone in my group decided to just basically tweet the link to this Zoom meeting, and within about 2 minutes, we were basically what's called Zoom bombed. So we had people jumping into the meeting that shouldn't be there, and they were, you know, causing distractions and being inappropriate. So this is something we need to think about. So make sure if you're doing a meeting that it's secure, you're using passwords if possible, or that you're making sure that you're not sharing these links publicly. So again, I mean, in this case, it's a pretty open session. I'm not too picky about who joins us for today, but you need to think about this as you start to plan for more important meetings where you're having discussions or sharing information that you wouldn't want to be publicly known. Background, I talked about. This is not my ideal background. It's a little busy. It's my office. If possible, or if no other options, a blank wall, or even just like a door. Or like a closet doors, you know, if you're doing a big important meeting and you're not comfortable, what you just don't want is you don't want something in the background that's either inappropriate, you know, if it's messy. I mean, you're bringing people into your homes, which is okay, but you want to make sure that it represents your organization and yourself the best you can. So just think about that. Sound quality and video, sound and video quality. You may need to think about, I mean, depending upon what type of gear you have at home, you may need to think about kind of stepping it up. There's lots of relatively cost effective. I mean, if you're a gift officer or if you have expectations that you're going to be doing and hosting some major meetings, you may want to either ask for or go out and purchase some upgraded gear to allow you to capture the sound and capture the video at a better quality. Again, first impressions are important. And if we're using, like, you know, a potato quality camera, that's going to have an impact, you know, if it's all pixelated and doesn't look good. Polling, I mean, I just want to share with you something that we do here. This is a capability within Zoom, but many of the other video tools, depending upon what your level of subscription, they have something like this. So I'm gonna share this, and I'm hoping it shows up on your screen. John, did that poll go live? Excellent. So please take a moment, if you don't mind, and just answer the poll. It's an anonymous poll, so we won't, you know, we're not tracking who answers what. But basically, I've been doing this with every AFP chapter I've spoke to across the country. So I've got a great big data set of really what's the most important issues of AFP members. I'm going to share these results back with you in your chapter, as well as the global or the national results across Canada, so you can kind of get a sense to help, you know, plan your next education session, or, you know, however you want to deliver content. So again, thank you for filling this out. It looks, and I'll share it, but it looks as if donor relations, engagement, and stewardship, which is actually countrywide, that seems to be a big trend across the whole country. I'll share the poll before the end of the day, but you can do neat, innovative things with these video calls to help improve the engagement, you know, that sort of thing. And final is training. Now, we of course are, you know, learning a lot of new technologies and tools ourselves, but we also have to put ourselves in the minds of our donors, of our board members, of our volunteers who we may be asking to engage with us using video. So we've heard lots of examples of, like, you know, people that will do like a test meeting before the official meeting. So, you know, let's all log on for 10 minutes and just make sure that we can all, you know, have this meeting before the actual official meeting. It helps reduce a ton of stress and allows people to get that lot more comfort level. We also have seen teams that do videos. So just a really quick little explainer video. Hey, we're going to send you a link. You need to click here. You need to turn this on, and you need to accept this, you know, whatever. So you can take a minute to kind of help your constituents. If you're asking them to engage with you through video, just be prepared that you may need to look at that as something to think about. And the last thing I'll share is policies. Are you set up to be able to do voting online, for example, or an electronic vote through email or something like that? You may need to, if you haven't done so, you may need to look into your policies or bylaws or you know, your board documents to say, are we set up to do this? Because that may be something you may need to think about or change, you know, barring we may have a, you know, a board meeting or a big decision that's coming down the line in May and June, and we're still not out of isolation quite yet. So again, just things to think about as we you know, move through this new territory. So the Harvard Business Review put out a really great article a little while ago just about managing from home. And so if we're managing from home, or if you're being managed from home, there's things that we need to think about. You know, if your policy before was like an open door policy and, you know, come on in and chat anytime you have any problems. Well, an open door policy is a really tough to do now that we're all in isolation. It's almost impossible. So we need to think, we're lacking that face-to-face. So if that was your method of management, or a good chunk of how you shared information, we need to rethink how we're going to do that. Lack of access. You know, if not every single thing that you've ever done has been digitalized and centralized in a sharing service, you may have documents at your desk that you may not have easily accessible access to. So we need to think about this. We may not have that folder that we needed to make this decision. And of course, loneliness and distractions. I mean, those are just things that I think we need to think about. You know, we have lots of great examples. I was speaking with the CEO recently who said most of his time, the first few weeks since the isolation, most of his time was actually less on technical issues and much more on just simply helping his staff deal with issues at home, or deal with you know, struggles that they're having, you know, more personal. So just we need to just simply think about that. I mean, I know myself, I thought I was doing okay until I went to the grocery store just recently, and I found I was like super duper anxious, which I never experienced before. So there's just things that are kind of, you know, new things that are weighing on us, and we just need to be cognizant of that. So some of the tips to kind of, when we talk about, you know, managing from home, again, you know, it's structure. We are creatures of habit. That's going to help us. So creating that structure, creating potentially new rules of engagement. So you can't really do maybe an open door policy, but you can say, look, between this hour and this hour, I am open for, you know, chats every morning. If you know, people that maybe have done some work in the technology field, something called a scrum which is mostly for programmers and data folks. But a scrum is basically a really quick meeting. Now, if you've got a big team, you might have to do it into certain areas or projects. But a scrum is basically a really quick meeting at the beginning of the day. It's like everyone shares like 1 minute. What are they hoping to accomplish today? What are the barriers that they think are potentially going to be to accomplishing that, and who might be able to help them, achieve that goal? So maybe you want to think about doing a quick check-in on a weekly, bi-weekly, or daily, weekly, whatever. The article also talked about providing several different communication technologies creates a richer experience for people working from home. So what that means is email alone is not enough. If you're just using email to kind of communicate with your team, I would definitely suggest you start to look at other options of being able to engage with that team and not just one resource alone. So this may be the time to learn some new mediums, learn some new technologies. And again, really what we're talking about is we want to create a rich experience for the people working from home, and technology can be a way to do that. Social interactions, emotional support, I won't spend a ton of time there, but basically, we want to find other ways. If you've got every call in your meeting is a work call, we lose all that social, like, how was your weekend? Oh, what'd you get up to? Like, it's really quick for all those things to kind of disappear when we're all, all on, work Zoom meetings. And I don't know about you, but, even myself, who've done a lot of Zoom meetings, after I do 4, 5, 6 of these in a day, really, really difficult. So again, John's got some great suggestions there. We'll talk about that in a moment. So really try to provide ways to create more social engagements, and ways to be able to still do that. And again, provide that emotional support. We must empower our employees. Like if we've really been supervising with a very kind of, let's just say, a really hands-on approach, we need to accept that we need to give, good, clear direction. We need to trust and delegate to our team, and we need to empower them to be able to do it. And the same thing also goes almost to your board as well, which is, we need to make sure our boards are in position to start delegating. If we think about the speed upon which the government and the private sector have mobilized, have changed. Think about how businesses have changed the way they're delivering their products, out of necessity. Well, we are the same thing. We can't have that, maybe that, that traditional board, experience where it takes forever to make a decision. We need to start thinking about how we're going to empower that board, maybe breaking it into smaller teams that can delegate faster to make decisions much more rapidly. So I guess simply saying is that the teams that are going to succeed are the ones that delegate, empower, and take charge during this time of uncertainty. John, and I get some great chat here. I absolutely totally agree with you. Some of the basic technologies, just new technologies that we probably didn't need to think about in January or February, but we do now. Video. Again, we're using Zoom. It's not a bad tool, but you could, Facebook, Google Hangouts, WhatsApp, Skype, GoToMeeting, Join. There's tons and tons of tools out there that all have video capabilities. Whatever it is, pick one and learn it. And even encourage your team to say, look, we're going to book a meeting, and all we're going to do is literally learn how to turn on our cameras or whatever it is, depending upon your technology. Now, some folks, that have maybe a more robust technology or coming from a larger institute, you've already got a tool like Microsoft Teams. Awesome. Now is the time, if you haven't done it yet, now is the time to learn it and use it. So again, there's dedicated messaging apps. Again, I used Slack before. Slack's a great tool. There's free versions of it for smaller teams. There's paid versions of it as well. Blue Jeans is another. It's funny I don't have that on here, Marlene, but thank you. So again, the messaging app is important because it allows for very, very quick sharing of information and collaboration, but it doesn't kind of block up your email. Like, I don't know about you, but I gotta tell you, video or like chatting back and forth in emails to me is like just aggravating when you've got, response after response after response. It's really tough to keep up. But if you have it in a messaging app, it's much, much easier to kind of keep that information in one part and to kind of compartmentalize it a little bit. So again, I would definitely recommend, and I don't think it's fair to be texting your staff. Those text messages, and I don't mean fair, I'm being overly dramatic here, but I just mean, that those texts are for family and friends. And right now, I mean, it's an important time. So what I don't think it's fair to have, you know, your messages coming in with the texting. I would suggest you use a separate service that you can dedicate as work, you know, to the other side, and not fill up your staff's, you know, text feed and email feed specifically with, you know, chats back and forth. And of course, file sharing. I mean, I think that's pretty basic. I
Just going to jump in, Chris, for a second, and just say, back to your earlier point about social connections and so forth, that's also where messaging becomes so huge, because you can have the banter. It's not quite around the water cooler, but it does help build that emotional connection that a lot of people are missing that you can't do in email.
Well,
Sorry,
you can create, you know, you can create a, you know, whatever, the pet of the day group, and everyone shares their pet or a picture of their kids doing something funny, or, you know, whatever. I totally agree with you, John. I told you, so Teams and Zoom, Margaret, awesome tools. Now's the time to really learn them, learn all the ins and outs, learns all the capability. And then of course, file sharing, I think that's pretty basic. If you're sending emails back and forth with like track changes on, I got to tell you, welcome to the, you know, 2020. Use a file sharing service like Google Drive, Dropbox, OneDrive. Again, Microsoft offers a whole suite of capabilities there as well. But please take the time to learn these types of tools. So we've talked a little bit about working from home, and hopefully, you know, we're empowered to do more. But I wanted to share just some lessons learned, and just some kind of advice around, well, what's happening and well, what's happening in the world. We hear a lot of, not a lot, I don't mean a lot, I shouldn't say that, but I've heard enough of teams that in my mind are out there making all these assumptions for how their donors feel without necessarily talking to their donors first. And what I mean is, I was a major gift officer. I was a young major gift officer. I'd spent two years as a new gift officer, building my portfolio and building my relationships. And then 2008 happened. And all of these new donors that I had brought to the institution and had created these great new endowments, they were all underwater, and they weren't going to deliver what I had, you know, the vision that we had created for these scholarships and bursaries and endowments. And so the first thing I did is I was convinced. I knew these people, you know, I'd been meeting with them for years, lots of high touch points. And I convinced myself that, they're going to be upset. They are going to, you know, there's no way they're going to want to talk to me. Like, this is bad. The sky is falling. Well, that was an assumption that I made. I'm just sharing this as an example, but that was an assumption that I made. The reality was, when I actually started reaching out and started engaging and starting to, you know, to connect with these people, I found a vast majority of them completely understood exactly what was happening. They understood, you know, what was happening in the world. And many of the donors actually took that extra step to basically create operational funding or short-term funding to ensure that their endowments and scholarships continued, even though the endowment itself did not produce an allotment. So all I'm simply saying is that I'm hearing a lot of teams that make these assumptions of like, oh, well, we have to cancel this, or we have to close the doors, or we can't do this, or we're not on the front line, so we can't fundraise the way that, you know, health or hospice or research or you know, whatever it can do, or the hospital. I would counter argue that and say, we're making a ton of assumptions. You need to speak to your donors. You need to get out in front of them. You need to engage with them and really understand before we make any assumptions. Don't panic. Well, I think that's just basic. Kind of falls into the making assumptions. Let's not panic right now. Yes, there are going to be some donors, some segments of your donors who will be impacted by this, but there'll also be other segments of your donors who won't, depending upon their age and the sector that they work in. And there's other people, for example, a lot of the tech companies right now are actually going to do really, really well. And so I've spoken to CEOs of tech companies that are saying, we're making money in this period. I mean, if you think of, you know, all the new technology that we're using today, so there's just simply going to be a shift. And so again, don't panic. We're in this for the long haul. What we saw was that the teams that really rolled back, you know, the teams that started cutting fund development in 2008, 2009, when we had the economic downturn and then the swine flu H1 kind of pandemic at the same time, the teams that really rolled back on fund development, they laid off staff, they tried to keep their costs really low. Those were the teams, if you think of your pipeline as a machine, well, if we take this time off on our machine, we're going to have really big implications down the road. And the same thing here applies. So I appreciate that we're in a different environment. The things that we did traditionally are not going to work the same way, especially if we're very events-based. But what I simply mean is that if we kind of take that time off of our pipeline, we're going to have really big holes and gaps down the road. So now is not the time to disappear. Now is not the time to cancel. We need to find new ways. And what I mean is cancel is like, obviously look at ways of how can we switch that event to a virtual event, or how can we replace it with something else? How can we even talk to our donors and say, look, would you still consider a gift in lieu of, even though the event may not be happening? I would not make assumptions without speaking to your donors and really getting a sense of where their head's at. Again, there's going to be a percentage who will say, look, I'm out of a job. I can't support you the same way. There will be others who are like, yeah, of course I want to continue giving. As I'm just looking at my notes here, what we do want you to do is rally and reach out. So now is the time to bring your board, bring your donors, bring your leadership, bring your staff together, and really rally them, really reach out to them. Spend the time with them, spend the time engaging with them. You want to pivot and amend. Sorry, I'm jumping around a little bit. Focusing on the big three is really about, and what I mean here is that if you've got a fully developed pipeline, now is the time really to focus on your regular and recurring and kind of long-time donors. Now's the time to spend time with your major donors. Now's the time to spend time with your plan giving people. So if you're not in a great position to acquire donors today, basically retention is your best acquisition strategy. And some ideas for this are like, we're seeing a lot of people go to like virtual events. Cystic fibrosis, for example, and they're still going to do their walk, but instead of actually doing a walk, it's they're going to do a challenge at home where you do push-ups, or you climb stairs, or you hit your treadmill, whatever it is. We're seeing a lot of people look at online auctions and bingos and it escapes me, but anyway, different kind of online tools. So again, now's the time that we need to pivot. Now's the time that we need to think a little bit differently about how we're doing this. And some of those ideas are like, can you offer really bespoke services or programs to your major legacy donors? Is there something unique that you can do for them, or create a really special thing just for them, make them feel really special? Can you offer like do you have someone in your network who'd be willing to offer like an estate planning session that you can target to a segment of your donors, perhaps? If you're an artistic group, can you create a unique artistic performance, or could you host classes with some of the great staff or volunteers or people within your network? Is there things that you can create private time so that someone could have time with your executive director that maybe they never had the time to do in the past? Those sorts of things. How can you bring your expertise and give back? And much of the way that Global is kind of giving back, and I'm giving back of my time, if you're not in a position to directly ask, then you really need to be thinking about how can you demonstrate the way that you're giving back to the community in this time. So again, can we give back in humor or arts? There's lots of need for that right now today. Finally, plan ahead. And I know it's easy to say that right now. It's very easy to say that, but the teams that planned ahead, and what I mean that are the teams that have diversity in their fundraising shops. So they're not just heavy on events. They've got diversity in lots of different channels of ways that they can raise money. Teams that, for example, really invested in monthly giving programs. These teams are going to weather this storm a lot better than those teams that only had maybe one or two primary channels of revenue. So think about that. Now is definitely the time to plan about, okay, well, if I am a shop that only had one major event, which is gone, we need to figure out what the future is going to look like for us, and what that means. So again, is there ways that we can plan ahead accordingly so we aren't left in this spot in the future? I'll just kind of finish this up here. I mean, just very quick reminders. Now is the time to connect with your donors. If you haven't done that, send caring messages. It's okay to reach out, and I know everyone's worried about spam, and I know we've got, like right now, I don't know if there's been a period of time where there's been more information sent to us than what we're experiencing right now, between the news, between everything that's coming to us. So I guess I caution you to say, if you're going to reach out, make it really simple. Like, it literally has to be as simple types of communication as you possibly can. Like, we're thinking, you need to be able to digest exactly what they're saying very, very quickly. So again, send caring messages, check in on your people, thank them for their past support, and refresh. So I'm not saying cancel. I'm saying you need to refresh what you're doing, take a different spin on it, that sort of thing. So look, folks, obviously there's some really tremendous resources out there. AFP's got some great guides. Excuse me, Chronicles of Philanthropy. It's a subscription based, but there's tons of great material there as well. Take your time, take your time, get yourself familiar. Don't hesitate to reach out and ask. And that was really my objective here today. I was going to talk a little bit about the future of fundraising, but we'll leave that for another day. Real pleasure, as I said. John is, I'm from Halifax, but I'm working with teams across Canada. John is specifically in Ontario, and we just wanted the opportunity just to say thanks. Hope you found the session valuable. And my objective now is to, we got a few more minutes here before we round out the hour. I'm just open to anyone wanting to either share ideas, questions, things that are concerned. You've got kind of a big group of people here that I know are all willing to help. So I'll turn it over to you and just, hey, is there anyone's got any questions, thoughts, feedback, or suggestions? And you can hit us on chat, or you can join us right live on the camera if you'd like. Anyone? No questions?
Anybody facing some challenges right now in terms of events being canceled, or you're going to start a capital campaign? I know one organization down in Niagara was looking at starting a capital campaign with one of our consultants, and they're just taking a moment to think about it again and just sort of figure that out. So what are some of those challenges for you? Or is it, as we talked about, the office challenge of supervising or connecting with peers as you're all not in the same space? Someone's asking, are you using video in major gift outreach? Yes, please do. It's an interesting time, at least in my experience. I've reached out more, perhaps more by phone and video or certainly by video than I ever have before. And I think this is still a good opportunity. Most of the major donors that I've connected with are also using video now, perhaps some of them for the first time, but they're getting used to this as well. And so they're open to the conversation, and they're recognizing that it's new for everybody. But I would still give it a shot in terms of connecting with your major donors. And maybe you're not doing an ask on your first call, but check in with them on video so that you're establishing that relationship face to face.
And now, so John, I agree with you. I think we're going to see the rise of a digital gift officer as part of this, what's going to happen. So I think we're actually going to start seeing at least some of the larger organizations start to bring in people that have, specially, skill sets and the ability to engage digitally in that way. So yes. And I also think, I think now is a great time to, survey your donors. And I mean that in like ask them questions. Like, we've got some dedicated time right now that maybe we won't see again, in the future. So now's the time to ask them, collect those stories. Why do you give? What's your passion? Why do you support us? Get those questions if you don't have that data, of course. So there's lots of questions here. I think the next one is around any fresh ideas about events that have been postponed, like a convocation. Now that is a very, very specific event. There's lots of cool ideas, like fresh event ideas. Like, I've heard people that are working with local like caterers and local breweries to literally do gala dinners from home. So you sign up for the dinner, and literally the local food and alcohol provider literally delivers the meal to you, the day or whatever, the night of, that sort of thing. So, I thought that was kind of a really neat and innovative idea. I think we're seeing kind of like this idea of like gamification of fundraising that might be happening as well. And so again, I appreciate this doesn't help with convocation, and maybe we'll come to that.
Let me speak briefly to convocation.
Please.
Carleton's a little bigger than the college I'm working with. We only have about 15 grads this year, so it's a bit different. I recognize that. But one thing that we're looking at is the planning to do in the next month is have each one of those new grads be spoken of. This is a master's and doctorate degrees, be spoken of by an advisor. So it'd be a video meeting, just a select group of those grads and professors and advisors. It'll be recorded so they can share it with their family if they want to. But having an advisor speak into that person who is graduating, recognizing that they might do the actual convocation in fall, but at least it's a grad celebration at this time. It's one idea.
I love that. Any other ideas? I gotta open it up. Anyone have anything else doing anything innovative with big formal events like a convocation?
John, thank you for that. It's not a bad idea. I just want to say our dean in the business school is planning to do something that is a virtual event and engage the students and talk about them, but it's not to replace convocation. It's just kind of celebrate graduation.
Exactly.
So we're not canceling convocation, it's postponed. Just looking for ideas across the country. Has anybody got any neat ideas?
I'm happy to hear more ideas. I know there's a couple other schools on here. U of Ottawa's on here, but I'm not sure if you're involved in the convocation side. I'd be interested to know if people have the challenges. Somebody asks, how are you keeping your admin staff busy, engaged? Any answers or any suggestions on that?
Toby, I think you've got your hand up.
I know.
Over to you, Toby.
I magically became Toby partway through. Can you hear me okay? I'm a living example of some of the tech challenges you were talking about. I think we have numerous clients, and I think this is brilliant, who are redeploying staff as doing stewardship, totally focusing on donor stewardship, which is brilliant because I think, as you were saying before, Chris, it's all about retaining donors, really, right? And most of our clients have always wanted to do more stewardship than they were doing. What I think is a really amazing opportunity right now is to see if we can serve our donors, right? They're so often, it's the opposite, sort of opposite relationship where they are helping us. But when we think of the typical kind of age and possible time of life of many of our donors, particularly with direct mail, et cetera, really worried about how many of them are isolated, how many of them are lonely, how many of them might be living alone or caring for someone, in a very stressful situation. So I think we can almost take on the role of caring for them a little bit more. So it's a great idea in terms of stewardship to make contact by phone and little notes and drop, anything you can. But I think we could also really be serving people who might be feeling quite isolated. So it works both ways.
That's a great idea. I was working, one of my clients here locally is the Alzheimer's Society of Nova Scotia. They spent the first 6 days, so when isolation happened, the first 6 days, they called every single one of at least their active and engaged donors. Every one of them they called. Nice. And that took the whole team, that took the whole staff. So if you've got someone that you're like, I don't know what to do today, say thank you. Reach out, check in. How are people doing? You can script them, give them the telephone numbers and say, look, all I want you to do is, even if it's just leave a message. We're thinking about you. We just wanted to check in, see how you're doing. And again, as a donor to our organization, you're important to us. And here's why, it can be really simple and very quick. I spoke way too long here today, so I want to, if anyone else has any questions or suggestions, if you've got something that's really working really well, we'd love to hear it. We'd certainly love to encourage you to share. There's a comment there about telephone conversations. Again, the telephone is still obviously going to work. So take the time to pick up the phone if possible as well. Especially again, the age of your donors, it might just be easier to call them, and I think that's totally okay, completely. And sorry, so your name is not Toby?
No, my name is not
Lynn.
Toby. It's Lynn.
Oh,
it's Lynn. Toby
hi, Lynn.
Toby's the grade 8 student who just lost his Microsoft Teams science class. So we did a real quick computer swap.
Oh my goodness. Sorry, Lynn. Thank you.
Oh, it's good.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Well, folks, any other suggestions, folks? Oh, the polls. Let me share the poll, of course. Before we go, we're going to end the poll, and I am going to share the results. So it would seem, if you were to be planning some additional education for AFP Ottawa, probably something in and around the area of donor relations, engagement, and stewardship. I think that's basically been the top choice across Canada. I've surveyed about 200 AFP members, and that seems to be where most people land. And again, I mean, I think the best practice there is just simply, you know, putting it in place to actually achieve that. Is obviously it's about getting the activity up is what I'm trying to say. We need to adjust where we're spending our time, and we need to figure out that, you know, donor retention is probably going to be our best long-term investment for us. So I will share these results. Any other comments, folks, before we wrap up? No? Okay. Well, just before I let everybody go, the team here at Global Philanthropic, we did launch this virtually global platform, which allows you to book time with consultants, all virtually. It's all very easy to do. The big thing with it is we've elected to offer free sessions throughout the month of April. So if you'd like to chat with John, myself, or any of the other my colleagues, it's really simple to do right now. And again, it's a totally free offering. If you just want to have someone to pick their brain a little bit, it's really tremendous to do that. So thank you all. I really hope this was valuable. I appreciate the feedback. We'll be in touch with you through email just as a follow-up with the video and the data. I just want to thank Lynn and Harvey McKinnon and Associates for your sponsorship of these great sessions at AFP Ottawa. I want to thank my colleague John for joining us here to help me kind of moderate all these the great discussions. And again, just thank you all, AFP Ottawa. I love Ottawa. It's one of my favorite cities to visit. I get some family there, and just want to say thank you so much for your time tonight, or this afternoon. All the best.
Thanks very much, Chris. Really appreciate the time. And thank you, Lynn, as well, for sponsoring and joining us today. For the rest of you, thanks for coming, and look forward to chatting more with you along the way. Take care.
Thanks so much. Take care, everyone.